Hello everyone, how's it going? If you like the content, remember to like, sub, and share. It does help a great deal. If you want to support, join in, and super thanks does support me directly. And if you dislike the video, dislike it. So Avowed. Avowed is an upcoming fantasy first-person game from Obsidian Entertainment. Obsidian has a really good reputation among the gaming community for an array of titles from The Outer Worlds. They have the South Park Stick of Truth. They have Fallout New Vegas, Knights of the Old Republic 2. So they have a rich catalog of games, and people expect great things from them as expected. And Avowed, well, when it was first revealed, a lot of people were memeing on this game. They thought that it wasn't that great, that it was kind of just like a bare bones mediocre title. And they also delayed the game to give people some breathing room, but I think they were just trying to work out all the criticisms that have been showering in since the reveal of this game. And the Gamescom trailers actually have been looking pretty good for this title. Like, it seems they took a lot of the criticisms to heart, and I can say, yeah, it looks a lot better now. So looks like it might be another banger. However, of course, there's going to be issues, and they already came out. So I just want people to be aware of this tweet from Aaron Greenberg, who is the vice president of Xbox Games Marketing at Microsoft, and says 60 frames per second will be the standard outlet, but architecture allows us to support up to 120 frames with the Xbox Series X. Now, we've all seen how much that's been true. Starfield didn't launch with 60 frames per second until a post-launch patch. Redfall, also post-launch patch. Granted, that studio closed down after Microsoft had its own bloodbath. And yeah, so this has not been the standard until a post-launch situation, and now it looks like Avowed will be joining that, and it's just really disappointing. So I guess that delay is not going to help them with enough time to create a 60 frames per second, but this is what they're targeting, and this comes from the Iron Lords podcast. So from IGN, Avowed will now run baseline of 30 frames per second across Xbox Series X, and as developer Obsidian has confirmed. Speaking on Iron Lord's podcast, art director Matt Hasten and said Obsidian is targeting a baseline of 30 frames per second for the first-person fantasy RPG. 60 frames per second sounds unlikely, however, even on the most powerful Xbox Series X. So there have been reports that the reason that this is happening, not just this situation, but in general with Xbox, it's because of the Xbox Series S, and it's holding back the Series X, because when you develop a game, you develop for the weakest console possible and you update it from there. So that could be the reason, or it could be that they just don't have the time, the effort, or it could be also a technical situation. Granted, console gamers like myself have been waiting for the standard to be 60 frames per second, and it does make a huge difference. If you've ever experienced 60 frames per second, 120 frames per second, at least I have on my PC, it is a game changer. It actually looks incredible, and it actually encouraged me to get a 244 hertz monitor. So it does definitely look a lot better. As opposed to resolution, I think 1080p is perfectly fine. Like, I didn't really notice a difference when it came to 4K, but when it came to frames per second, you definitely notice the difference. It's a first-person single-player game. You don't necessarily need that 60 frames per second. Just because you don't need it doesn't mean it's not great to have. Like, a lot of people expected that this generation, that 60 frames per second would be the standard. Just like during the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 age, HD visuals were the standard. So yeah, it sucks that people are saying like this is not a big deal, you don't need that. It doesn't matter if you don't need it, it should be the standard by now, considering how much these consoles already cost, like $500, $600. Like, it's rumors that the PlayStation 5 Pro will be like $600 to $700. At that point, if 60 frames per second isn't the standard, like, what the hell, man? Like, they also lied to us about no loading times, and, well, Black Myth Wukong has loading times, just saying. We are targeting 30 frames per second, bare minimum, Hansen said. That's the expectation. It's a first-person single-player game. You don't necessarily need that 60 frames per second. You know, for a first-person game, you technically do. Like, I just feel like it would be nice. It makes it a lot easier to see what's happening on screen, as that allows us to get a lot juicier with the VFX and lighting and all that other stuff. I can tell you right now that, well, I'm just going to speak from personal experience. I would rather play on performance mode. I don't like high quality mode because I prefer frame rate. If I'm wrong about it, actually put down in the comments below whether you prefer frame rate to resolution. I would like to hear other people's opinion because personally, I've always preferred frame rate. I will definitely take a lower resolution, even 720p resolution if it meant 60, 120 frames per second. I will 100% do that. So I'd love to hear other people's opinions on that, and if you have give your opinion, full opinion of why. It's a trade-off we opt to make relatively early, and we're happy with that. The game's running pretty smooth for visually dense it is, and that was always our goal, but Obsidian is still figuring out the nitty-gritty of performance. It's one of the last things you do, Hansen said. So maybe this is them trying to cover their bases. I'm not trying to take one side or the other. It could be just because of technical issues. Like I stated, they did add 60 frames per second in future patches, like with Starfield and with Redfall. So it could be a thing that we're going to focus on this, and once it's done, maybe later on we might do it. He hasn't said that, but I'm being hopeful there. So they're just looking for the baseline to just get the game out in the best condition they can. So I commend them for that because a lot of AAA games do launch broken, and it's become an extreme problem. Like, despite me liking Black Myth Wukong, it has a lot of technical issues. I've fallen through the map like 3 times. Lighting is a major issue. There are frame rate issues with the Destined Ones, who's the main character's clothing, like going 2 frames per second, and the water effects are just like all over the place. But yeah, it's not a completely broken game, but there are a lot of technical issues with it. Avowed is due out in February 2025 on PC, Xbox, and joins the list of Xbox Series X and S games that launched 30 frames per second in recent years. The list includes Bethesda's Starfield, I stated that, which they got a post-launch patch, Arkane's Austin's Redfall, which is closed down now, but they got the 60 frames per second patch, and they also got the offline mode. And Ninja Theory's 2, Hellblade 2 has yet to receive a 60 frames per second update patch. I don't know why that game doesn't have it, because it is like 2 to 3 hours long, and I see no reason why it shouldn't be 60 frames per second. Indeed, Obsidian's reasoning for targeting 30 frames per second comments made by Bethesda development chief Todd Howard in explaining why last year's Starfield at 30 frames per second on both Xbox Series X and S. I think it'll come down to no surprise given our previous games, what we go for. Howard said at the time, always these huge open worlds, fully dynamic, hyper detailed, where anything can happen. Yeah, 16 times the detail with Fallout 76. He's never gonna live that down. And we do want to do that stuff. It's 4K and in the X. No, who cares about 4K? Like, seriously, does anyone care about 4K? Like, unless you have a 4K monitor, it's completely pointless. Like, I've gotten people in my comments saying, why is it 4K? I'm like, do you have a 4K monitor? No. Then it doesn't matter. Almost no one has a 4K monitor because it's expensive crap, in my opinion. Frame rate is one thing. Frame rate looks really different, and you can notice the difference. Maybe it's just me, but I've never noticed the difference between 1080p and 4K. Maybe I'm the one who's delirious and crazy, but that's just my opinion. I've yet to see anyone give me a plausible reason to get a 4K monitor. So again, tell me your opinion below. I'm sure there are a lot of very tech-savvy people who understand it more than I do, but I'm just talking as a basic consumer. It's a 1040 on the S. We do lock it in at 30, but because we want that fidelity, we want all that stuff, we don't want to sacrifice any of it. I will sacrifice 50% of the, just take away all the particle effects, and I'll be happy with the 60 frames per second. I don't understand why that's such an issue. Is resolution more important than frame rate? I feel like frame rate would be more important. Fortunately, in this one, we've got it running great. It's often running way above, sometimes 60. Then make it 60! But on the consoles, we do lock it because we prefer consistency, and you're not even thinking about it. Yes, you are. Like, if you can notice the difference between 30 and 60. Like, you can. Like, it's not like with resolution. You definitely notice the difference between 30 and 60 frames per second. We don't even want to sacrifice that experience that makes our games feel really, really special, so it feels great. We're really happy with how it feels even in the heat of battle. We need that headroom in our games. Really, anything can happen. I feel like this is a real non-answer, all of this. But, Todd Howard's good at speaking, so, he kind of had to fluff it up. But, yeah. As in the case with recent Xbox games, Avowed may end up with a 60 frames per second performance mode post-launch. Yeah, judging by everything that's happened, they're probably going to launch the game and then get that out later, but still, it should launch with it. I remember with Redfall, they had that sticker on the box where it said 60 frames per second, then they kind of had to, like, remove it. Oh, God. So that's the whole situation. So tell me what you think in the comments below about this. I do think it's a big deal because we're right now at the point where I think 60 frames per second should be the standard for games releasing in the modern day, especially AAA games. And I would 100% sacrifice resolution for frame rate, but there are people out there who say they want their cake and eat it too. So I don't know, but I would rather have the 60 frames per second if it ran at 1080p. But tell me what you think in the comments below. I'd love to hear other people's opinions. Tell me which one you care more about, frame rate or resolution. Give your opinion. I'd love to hear other people's opinions on this. This is just my opinion. But yeah, that's it from me. Like, dislike, your choice. If you want to support, join, super thanks. But yeah, stop rambling. Bye.